Hi guys, how's it going? I'm just doing a little bit of personal maintenance stuff in the house. Getting rid of old newspapers. You know, with the day and age of recycling and stuff like that, I have a different use for it. I actually burn them in my wood stove back at the other house. I roll them, and I roll them real tight, and then I burn them. And they burn. I usually use them. They don't give as much heat as wood, but they burn a little bit longer than wood. So where I will use them is when I'm doing something in the garage and then going in for, say, supper or lunch or something. Then I'll throw one in there, or one or two in there, and it'll just keep the fire going without having to stoke it up for a while. So that's what I'm going to do. I'll show you how I do it with a fixture that my father-in-law had. He had tried it, but he always had trouble winding it, and I used it before, and I've tried different ways of getting it to wind, and just always had trouble getting it to, the starting one. Getting the first piece of paper on is tough. So what I do is I take the newspaper and I'll just take it section by section and tear it in the middle where it folds. So you don't have to do that, but by doing that, it doesn't bunch up funny. So I do that for most of it, and I'll throw flyers in and everything. And just get this piece of paper out and show you the rig that I use, if I can get it out of the way. Okay. This is the tool I use here, and this is what it's made for. It's for rolling newspapers. It's got the crank handle, which has the shaft here. And one of the things my father-in-law had trouble with was when you were winding it, you'd be winding and it would come out, and it was a real pain in the butt. Then trying to get it back in when you had a bit of newspaper on there was a trouble. So I solved the problem using just a regular clip. I put it in, stick it on, and that prevents it from coming out. Very simple solution. What I've also got is one small clip here that I try to do this every day, so it's not a big task. If I get a partial roll done and I don't have enough paper to finish it, all I have to do is take my little clip and I'll clip the paper on the side so it doesn't unspool on me. There are springs in here, pieces of spring steel that are supposed to prevent that from happening, but they don't really work. Another thing I have done is this is like a letter opener, and I just clipped it on there with another clip, and that's for cutting string, which I use to tie the bundles. And the string I use is this is wax coated string, and I just need a little more than the length of this by about 4 inches, 3 inches. So I just use, just pull it out and slide it on there and give it a quick cut. That's still, getting it started was still a bit of an issue, and I found a way to solve that. I go to the dollar store and I pick up a 10-pack of these for about $1.50. Just good old-fashioned cheap glue sticks. And I start by gluing the first piece and folding it over a couple of times. So I'll show you how I do that. Now I've been doing this for off and on for a number of years. I used to roll them for my father-in-law because he would just get frustrated with it. So all I do is, I'm sitting watching TV, so normally the sound would be on, and so I can watch TV because it's not that noisy. But I just basically take the glue, and I'll take about a, I would say 2-inch section here, and I just run the glue on it, just like that. And then I take the, and this is just a single sheet of paper, and I will fold it up about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. About 1.5 inches, I would say. So it's doubled up with the glue. Then I take the glue and put a swipe on that doubled up section. Then I'll double that over as well. So now this is basically 4 layers thick, but it's still a single piece of paper. That makes it so much easier to start this thing. So now I'll just set you up and show you how it goes. And I'm doing it watching TV. It's really not that bad. You know, it's mindless work. Let's see if I can get this so I can see. Okay, just turn you down a little bit. I don't need to see the handle. There we go. Okay, now you'll notice that in the rod on the crank here, there's a slot. That's to hold the paper for when you're cranking it. So what I do is I take that little seam that I glued and I stick that into that slot. And by doubling it up, it just holds it a little bit better, but you don't want it too stiff. So I just put it on, put a little bit of tension on, and start to wind. And my tension on there is preventing that bit of paper from slipping through the slot. And I just, by holding it with my fingers, I wind it fairly tight. And then when I get about 3 inches or so, I'll take another piece of paper and tuck it underneath this one, but up against the roll. And sometimes I'll even glue it just to make it a little easier. But if you don't, it just starts tucking it in, and that's why I leave 1 inch or so. And again, now I'm starting to get a little close to this end, so I can just take that and fold it in a little bit, and I'll correct it with the next piece. So now I've got a couple on there. I'll take 2 pieces and tuck the 2 in. And it doesn't have to be pretty, so just 2 in place and then crank it up. Okay, and take a couple more. Say 2 or 3. Tuck them in onto the roll. Fold this paper down over. Wind it up. Now having multiple on here, I can just separate the ones I've wound, and I just usually rest my arm on there, grab a few more, get them tucked in. 3 or 4 on here. And again, crank it up. And as I go, I just start grabbing more and more sheets because it's easier to do multiple sheets. And you can get it just as tight. So it's about half a dozen sheets there. Now it's starting to bind at that side. It'll correct itself a little bit. Because it never rolls perfectly straight. And there's no use spending a lot of time trying to get it to roll straight because it just takes a lot more time and it still burns the same ways. A few more sheets, roll it up. A few more sheets. And this is about 2 days worth of newspapers. And of course, as it gets larger, you don't have to crank as many times for each roll to be taken up. That's a bigger roll. And it's starting to get up to where it's going to be a full roll. And as you get going, it rolls it faster. Sometimes it goes crooked enough to do that. Not a problem. You just fold it over. Start the next one. And it'll still roll tightly. And depending on the thickness of the paper, 2 days will make one log. Okay, so it's crunching over again. Like I say, it doesn't have to be pretty. It's just going to get burned anyway. Grab a few more sheets. Tuck them in. Clean them up. And now I'm starting to get to where I've got to start watching. Because once it gets big enough, you can't roll anymore very effectively. There's a few more sheets on there. Well, it looks like I might get all of these on there. So I'm grabbing, I don't know, 6 or 8 at a time here. Binding them in. Like I say, it doesn't have to be pretty. I've seen people do it where they carefully do it one sheet at a time and it takes you forever to do it. Okay. Now it's looking like I'm getting pretty close to the most I can put on here. So, this will be the last multiple piece section I will roll. And it's bunching up again. Now for the last piece, I just do a single sheet underneath a single one of these. So I'll take one of these and I'll throw it all the way back so you can see what I'm doing. And I'll just put some glue on there and glue this down a little bit. And I'll add a little more glue, just a little bit farther down, and put the last single sheet on that little bit of glue. And you don't have to use glue. I've seen people use water, but this glue is cheap, and a little $1.50 box from the dollar store lasts me a long time. Thousands and hundreds of logs. Okay, so that's glued on. Then I'll just put a little more glue on top of that paper, which is hanging off the end. Make sure that's folded in. And I will roll this one just a little bit slower and making sure I'm staying tight. And when I get really close to the end, I'll glue this piece down, which I don't really have to, but I do, and I'll put a little bit of glue across there. Flip that down, and then about another quarter of a turn. And wherever that's going to end up, I'll just run a quick strip of glue across there. And glue it down. So that's done, that's rolled. So you can tell that there's a rod across here and it's just barely touching. So next is going to be to take the log out of there. So I'll take the clip off, and I'll take the crank and turn it backwards while holding the roll. Hold the roll, turn it backwards a couple times, and that's basically getting that little lip out of there. And then just wiggle this back and forth and pull it out at the same time. Sometimes it's tougher than others, but I've always been able to get it pulled out. And you could spray this with likely a bit of silicone spray. Okay. Now, there's my log. And as I had mentioned before, I use this as the length of my string. So I just take the roll of string, pull out just a little more than the length of this, and cut two pieces. That's all it takes. Then just a couple of quick knots. The nice thing with using this waxed string is, let's see if I can do it so you guys can see here. The nice thing about using the waxed string is, instead of just doing the first bit here, I'll wrap it around twice. Pull it tight, and then pull in the opposite direction. And because it's waxed, it's now going to stay. So you don't have to try and hold it tight. Then I just tie another knot. Simple as that. Turn it around. Take the other string underneath. Wrap it around twice. Pull it tight. The opposite direction, it'll stay. Tie the second knot, and there is your paper log that weighs probably, well, as much as 2 newspapers, so a couple of pounds. And listen, like that is a solid paper log. And those little bits that stick out, they work great for lighting it. So, take the finished log, add it to the pile. Now I don't have enough to do this whole log, so what I'll do is I have this, the weight of the handle, the weight of the crank here keeps it kind of, so it's not going to unspool on you as long as you keep this tight. So I just keep this tight, pull it down over the front edge, put the clip on it, and it keeps it tight until tomorrow when I have more newspapers to roll. And then I just keep my supplies right on top. So there you have it. That's how I deal with newspapers. It's a form of recycling, and I'm getting some BTUs out of it. So just thought I'd show that to you. Take it easy and have a good one.